And we're back. Welcome to Abstractable. I'm Lockie and this is Ryan. And this is a podcast where we talk about the things in the world around us that we're curious about. And we hope to learn along the way with you. This episode, we talk about the book Total Recall by the man himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And what do we cover? We talk about Arnold's life from his humble beginnings in Austria with no running water or electricity, to then how he progressed to America to become an entrepreneur, a politician, and also the Hollywood movie star that we're all familiar with. We talk about Arnie's rules and his 10 rules for life that has got him to where he is now today. And then we reflect on how we can move towards more of a risky life and a spicy life.
Spicy life.
Arnold is on Twitter at Schwarzenegger, but you can pretty much find him everywhere. So we hope you enjoy this episode. Episode 5.
Is that what we're up to? That's awesome.
We're making ground, mate. We've survived.
Basically professionals.
We probably survived like the first cull off of 50% of people going into this. That was probably post episode 1. And now we're gradually finding our way.
We're learning every time. So we're getting better. That's awesome.
It's maybe we get to episode 10 or 20 or 50 before we celebrate too much though.
Yeah, I'd say so. So first time we've done a biography. Which is cool. Thank you. Yeah, just clarifying. Which is really, I love reading biographies. I reckon it's just so awesome. It's so interesting to learn about different people.
How interesting is that we enjoy so much hearing the story of others?
I reckon for me it's just so satisfying because you know it actually happened, and some of the stories are way better than made up stories anyway. At least the way people tell them. Whether they're true or not is another thing.
and funnily enough, the subline for this book is my unbelievably true life story or something like that, isn't it? Yeah. And
the book is Total Recall, which is the Arnold Schwarzenegger, his autobiography. And there's definitely a distinction for me between autobiographies and biographies. And they tell you different things in terms of what people think of themselves, and then more of a factual.
We're gonna have to do a biography next to try and get a different perspective.
Yeah. Have you read any good ones that you enjoyed?
Of Arnie's?
No. Just any other biographies.
The Walter Isaacson. He's regarded as like the pinnacle of biographers, isn't he? You know, just the amount of effort and dedication that goes into every single one is like a life's research, basically. You know, he's done Leonardo da Vinci. He's done
Benjamin
Franklin, Steve Jobs.
He wrote one called The Innovators, which I read, which is about different people who invented computing. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And he's done a few other bits and pieces along the way as well.
Yeah. Hasn't he done one on Einstein too? But I haven't read it.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But have you read the Steve Jobs one?
No. No. It's on
the list?
It's just over there.
Just on the shelf. Just waiting to be read.
So, Arnie.
Yeah. So he was born in July 30, 1947. And did you listen to this on an Audible? Yeah, me too. So audiobook.
I highly recommend this on audio too.
Yeah.
It was really well done.
Yeah.
There's the intro and the outro done by Arnie himself.
Yeah.
Which, you know, can be good. Can be difficult to understand at times.
He is a much impersonated person.
Yeah.
I loved it when he was reading it. In fact, I was very disappointed when chapter 1 he stopped reading it, but I understand why.
It lost a little bit of vigour.
Yeah, it was pretty long.
Yeah.
It's a big book.
He's
had a pretty full life.
I was going to say it's probably like an equivalent of like a 500-page book or just under.
Yeah.
Based on the length of the audio.
So he was born in Austria, and his father, to parent, mum and dad, father was a policeman who fought for the Nazis in the World War. 2, and his mum was a stay-at-home housewife. They were very poor, and he kind of described not having electricity or running water. And there was one of the most exciting moments of his childhood he remembers when they got a fridge. So that kind of gives you the kind of basis of how he grew up. It sounded like he had a pretty tough childhood. He had a brother called Meinhard.
That's well done.
You like that pronunciation? I put on a little accent, which I'm not sure about, but there we go.
Give it a go. Yeah, I love it.
Bugger.
I'm expecting an Arnie impersonation somewhere in this episode.
They went to church every Sunday. They, but it wasn't what I'd call a happy childhood. His father was a pretty brutal guy. A lot of violence in the home. I'm not mainly towards the kids, and Arnold was definitely not his favourite. And it said that his father suspected that Arnie wasn't even his child.
Yeah,
which interesting in itself, really. That can't be a happy household.
Was this old man, his father, was he alcoholic? Or am I thinking?
Yeah, he was a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
Yeah, so would always be at the pub or, I think,
tough upbringing.
You'd guess it was something to do with coming back from the war maybe, but you don't know.
Yeah. Just to frame that situation, like this is in Austria. He was born just before the end of World War II, but pretty well he's brought up post World War II in this sort of post-war austere socialist Austria.
Iron Curtain.
The Iron Curtain's rolled in, and it's everything is about conformity, and so. He said he wasn't just isolated in the way that he was treated. He said the majority of Austrian kids were treated this way. It was to sort of break the back and to force them into conforming to that sort of way of life, which is really, really interesting. And he said that whether this is just something he's now sort of retrospectively looking at or not doesn't matter. But he said he had the will to never give in to that. So, and I guess it does resonate throughout the book and what he does within his childhood.
So he was a pretty sporty guy as a kid, and started lifting weights when he was about 15. It says 14, 15 is a little bit conjecture about exactly when he started.
Probably doesn't matter because
he made up for lost time.
I certainly was not lifting weights at 14.
No, it's probably bad for you. They reckon, don't they?
Yeah, it stunts growth.
Yeah, not for him.
But if you're, and we're going to get slaughtered here. But if you go into like heavy weights, that's where you start stunting growth.
Yeah, okay.
Because you're impacting upon other normal growth that should be taking place.
Yep. Yeah. So he got that fridge and started lifting weights. He absolutely dove into it with incredible gusto, with an intensity that we'll talk about later, but is beyond most people's ability, to focus on one thing and quickly found a lot of gains. He would work out in a gym in Graz, as he calls it. Great. I'm giving myself a pat on the back.
Yeah. I'm impressed.
And he started to get some attention, and he met Mr. Austria in 1961 and got invited to work out at his gym. So he's starting to sort of meet the big players in the scene, the bodybuilding scene, which wasn't a massive thing back then. It was more like a cult following from some people, but it wasn't like a famous sport really.
And this again sort of falls on the times, that are at hand, because this is also a time, where social progress, if you will, was, far more reserved and restricted than what it is today. And, the bodybuilding scene was seen as this sort of show-offy, plus you're wandering around in jocks, you know, showing off all your muscles, you know, and sort of that the gay movement, everything else that sort of evolved with it this sort of had all those lights shining through that were, you know, which weren't seen as lights back then. And so that's why it's sort of took so much for him to, you know, take a hold to this type of thing. You know? Pretty impressive.
Yeah. But he had a pretty, you know, he talks in the book about having a really strong sense that he wanted to get out of there and go to America and become a famous actor.
Well, he saw
very early on.
He saw America as the the land of the free, to make your life and become who you wanted, which contrasts with the perspectives of what was happening in Austria.
Yeah, yeah,
which was like one of his first visions. You know,
get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
There was compulsory military service back then in Austria, so he completed 1 year when he was 18, and during that time he won a junior Mr. Europe contest. So getting up there. He wanted to use bodybuilding to get the hell out of Austria, and he got on his first plane in 1965, and he came second. He went to London, came second in the Mr. Universe competition. So his life kind of moves in these sort of chunks where he's, you know, he's a bodybuilder, and then he moves into acting, and then he moves into politics, and then back to acting. But all through it, he's basically building a business empire as well, which is really interesting.
A real entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Yeah, he really is. Again, he kept going. He came second. His muscle tone wasn't quite there, or size or whatever. But he won it when he was 20, Mr. Universe, and he won 3 more times in his career.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's not to mention his Mr. Olympia titles. But he moved to Venice Beach.
I was going to say, but when you know, all these titles and things, when you watch recommended documentary, Pumping Iron, have you seen Pumping Iron? Yeah, it's just another level.
It's ridiculously weird and funny and awesome.
Yeah. And for anyone that's been to the gym or lifted weights, and then to see what's going on in this, you're just like, what am I doing?
See, I didn't really see it that way. I kind of saw it as like, and because I watched it while I was reading this book, an interesting insight into Arnold himself and his persona and his showmanship, almost like I felt that a lot of that was complete rubbish, but it all kind of moved. He was creating this persona of, I love it so much. Which he did, but he amped it up. You know, like he exaggerated. He was larger than life, and the things he said were meant to shock, and the way he carried himself was meant to intimidate his opponent, Lou Ferrigno, and he has a loose relationship with truth, in my opinion. And he uses that to his advantage.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that what he says is necessarily often untrue, but I reckon it's
it's like
distortion.
Reality distortion field.
Yeah, it's close to the truth, but it's not.
Yeah, it's the truth he wants to be the truth.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And the truth is that he worked incredibly hard in the gym for hours and hours and hours every day.
And then went and worked after doing that.
Yeah, and went to night school and then went to do all this other stuff. So that's all 100% true. But the way he talks about it and some of the stuff he says, like he, like I think in that documentary he says he missed his father's funeral so he could work out or something. And you're like, well, is that the reason? You know, like,
I think he missed his brothers too.
He did.
Yeah.
He missed his brothers as well. But he says in the book that was because his brother dies Massive spoiler.
Spoiler.
Shame on you for laughing.
But how can it be a spoiler when it's someone's life? It's kind of like
Yeah.
we're not ruining the plot of the
No, but just to be clear,
sci-fi action film here.
Yeah, true.
Terminator 17.
Yeah. To be clear though, you're a bad person for laughing. Just get that on the table. No, you're all right.
Don't backpedal now, mate.
Yeah. Well, your silence is intimidating.
Tap the inner Artie. He wouldn't backpedal.
No. I'm in your house. I feel a bit worried. I'm cornered here. So, anyway, where were we? 1965. He gets on the plane. A couple of years later, he wins Mr. Universe. In 1968, he realises his dream, moves to America at 21. And he's talking about being an actor, and everyone says you're crazy. So he's pumping iron, winning competitions, getting money from these competitions. Not much though, but on the side, he has a bricklaying business, and
why did he go into bricklaying, Lockie?
Well. Tough question without notice.
Take that on notice.
I'm going to say he's massive, but also the fact that there was a massive earthquake in LA around that time, and it was a great time to be laying bricks.
Because he sort of.
Do you have the answer?
Well, it was a coupling of one, he could be working out while he was working, so he did it with his gym partner. It was the both of them that went into the bricklaying business. Franco. There's an awesome anecdote. If you can find it, you'll be able to find it easily if you Google Arnie bricklaying story about how he negotiate the prices for for his jobs. Did you ever hear that? No.
So basically, what they'd do is
this good cop, bad cop?
Yeah,
thing?
I'm going to full murder this, but basically what he'd do is he'd go there and say, he'd measure up the job, talk about it in meters instead of inches and feet and stuff, so no one knew what was going on. And, and then he'd be like...
This is later.
Yeah?
This is the marble.
Right.
Yeah, this is a separate thing. Yeah, this is good.
So anyway, he's measuring up and he goes, I think it's going to cost... I don't know. I think it's going to cost about $500. I'll just talk to my business partner and check it out. And they'd start yelling at each other in German, right? Him and Franco, and then he'd go back and go, I don't know if you can do it. He goes, look, I'll try and knock a little bit extra off for you. And then he'd go back to him and say, look, and they'd start arguing in German again, full act, and then he'd knock $100 off, and really the job's worth $300, but he's gone from $500 to $400. Franco's angry, and then the person says, "Oh, thank you, I'll take it."
Yeah, and then recommends it to all his friends. Yeah. But it probably hasn't changed either. It's probably exactly what the construction industry's doing these days.
That is negotiation 101 right there. So good.
But the thing was, right, is it was more like $2,000. And the job was worth about $300. and I think he used to talk up Franco, the guy who he's arguing with.
It's like a master craftsman
or
something.
Master craftsman from Austria, or I think they actually said Italy.
Yeah.
It said he was Italian.
I think he is Italian.
Oh, he is Italian, yeah.
But I think there was a real awesome... everyone loved European stuff at that time. It was like very exotic and in vogue, like Scandinavia right now for us. Yeah, very nice. It's a good catch. So his brother died.
It was a spoiler.
In case you didn't know, yeah. And his father died too. His mother lived quite a long life, and don't think she's alive now, but, Arnie stayed in touch with her for his whole life. And Meinhard died
Now,
during drink driving.
But she also came across to the States.
Yeah.
Didn't she?
Yeah.
Like she was basically living in the States.
Yeah. So he looked after her, and he also looked after or made sure Meinhard's young son got to America and was looked after basically. But he didn't attend either of their funerals. And I think one of them, he said that they didn't tell him when it was. He kind of found out that he'd died and he'd had his funeral. This was in the book, so I'm having a little bit of trouble in the detail. But yeah, so he missed one. I think his father's, he just didn't go.
Yeah. I think he definitely made reason for both, that there was other things going on at the time, but it was kind of like, well, what's the balance? What's the priority? And, I'm sure Arnie being Arnie could have made it to both. But he did have discussion around the sort of his internal pros and cons for each. And I think also in getting back to his village, he had a very tight time frame for one of them that he then had to be flying somewhere else in the world and he just couldn't make it work or whatever. So very interesting situation.
Very interesting. Went to night school while he was bodybuilding and working and doing this bricklaying and everything and earned a bachelor's degree in business and started buying property with the money. He didn't spend money, he kept it close. He lived a very modest lifestyle and started investing.
Well, if we go back to the the sort of social setting that we were set in, he had moved to Miami. You say Venice Beach? Venice Beach.
Venice, LA, sorry. I think Venice Beach is in Miami, isn't it? Is that right? So apologies, I probably...
Yeah, maybe I've stuffed that up. Anyway, wherever he'd moved, right, regardless of the situation...
America.
Yeah, it was in America and it was still in this sort of, very socially conservative era. But him and Franco, the frugal livers that they were, and they thought they were actually living in luxury when they first moved in. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, and that was seen to be very suspect.
Two men.
Yeah, 2 men sharing a 1-bedroom apartment.
Massive dudes as well.
Yeah. And so, one of them slept on the couch, the other one slept in the room, and they thought it was the best thing ever. They thought it was great. They were saving money.
Yeah.
Cheap. And they were able to save the coins to then jump into some of this other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting.
Because all they come from is, the socialist Austria.
Yeah.
And getting a fridge at the age of 15, 10.
So that was 1971 where his brother died. In 1970, he became the first time he won Mr. Olympia, and he won it 7 times. One of those times was pretty controversial. The last one, I think. He probably didn't deserve it, but they loved him so much they gave it to him. It was kind of the undertone of it. And one of those was also the one in 1975 was the one that was captured for pumping iron, basically. And he used steroids when he was working out, when they were legal back then, as more of a... He said he used them really to... when he was cutting, in the cutting phase of his bodybuilding, to keep the mass on, basically. So, pretty open about that.
Yeah, he's pretty open because I think it was, totally prevalent.
Yeah.
Through the entire industry. But he also, I'm sure he said about how he didn't want to become reliant on the steroids, and there were guys that became totally reliant on, cycling steroids the whole time. Whereas...
I think it was kind of known that, hey, this shit's a little bit bad for you. I reckon.
Yeah.
Like people would be seeing some side effects.
It's like smoking.
Yeah.
Just one more.
I'll make you smoke the whole pack. So he started, by this stage he had been meeting all sorts of people, right? he has some awesome stories about hanging out with like Andy Warhol, you know, famous actors, political figures, you know. He just got himself everywhere, and I think he was just a fascinating guy. Like when you watch, he's just so larger than life almost, and we'll get to that a bit later, but he made his way into many, many circles, and he always had this dream of acting, and he had a few, you know, cracks at it, but he really bided his time and waited, and in the background he was building up his property empire and this sort of stuff, but he made it big Conan the Barbarian in 1982. Around the time in 1983 he became a US citizen, and then he just started training movies. So 1984, Terminator, James Cameron, hot new director.
I was going to say, just on the citizenship thing too, he was actually able to retain his Austrian citizenship, which was basically unheard of for whatever reason.
Yeah. So special permission.
Yeah, he had to get special permission from the upper echelons in
which shows
Austria.
He was like a bit of a big deal already, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's a few of his movies. Terminator 1, 2, 3. Great movies. Commando. Love that.
I don't even know if I've seen Commando.
Get into it.
Is it worthwhile?
Predator. You've got to see Predator if you haven't seen Predator.
I've seen Predator.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Alien versus Predator too.
Twins, 1988, which has a freaking awesome story behind it too. Total Recall, the name of this book, 1990. Kindergarten Cop, True Lies. Among many others, but they were just some of the ones that popped out at me. And he was just really clever about how he handled his business. So basically Twins was seen as a very unlikely to succeed sort of movie, him and Danny DeVito in this weird sort of comedy. And so he cut a deal with them that he'd keep a certain percentage of the box office takings but have a very low salary. And that lowered the risk of making the film. And it was a huge success. And him and Danny made an incredible amount of money off that film just by a clever deal.
Royalties.
And backing themselves in. And Danny DeVito's done a lot of clever things. There's something else I picked up from this book, is that he's a really shrewd businessman too, and very funny on. Have you seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia? His character in that is just loose.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But it's like classic like Danny DeVito role,
but like really like wrong basically. Yeah. He's like a full creep.
Yeah. He plays that well.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got the caricature.
He might
sorted
be
out,
an interesting guy to look into, Cook, because he's not the person you'd think would succeed.
Has he got any
in
books?
Acting. Well,
we could consider.
Let's look into it.
Future reference. I was going to say,
please.
You've sort of like highlighted that he's definitely had like these major pop culture influences too. You know, rolling from building this following behind bodybuilding, because he's one of the preeminent figures in the bodybuilding world without a doubt, you know, and popularizing it.
Spiritual leader of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So much so that I think it drew him into contention yet again later in life, but we can talk about that. Then into movies and, you know, creation of these massive, well, they existed, but really starting to popularize these massive sagas, you know, and then rolling into sci-fi, you know, and the sort of sci-fi action hero that is, you know, in Predator, you know, in Terminator.
Yeah. And he was the first really big dude to be in movies, and they thought it was crazy. Someone like him will never make it, he can barely speak English, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which he also went to school to learn. So acting, you know, most people know a lot about that, but he again parlayed that money and that success into other business ventures such as Planet Hollywood, which he got out of before it went to shit. But he did stuff like he bought a jumbo jet, which is that is awesome, and all other sorts of things. But really, he married the niece of John F. Kennedy, Maria Shriver, in 1986, and who was the daughter of Sergeant Shriver, and really moved into the world of the Kennedys. And he's a staunch Republican, and they're all Democrats, but he basically learnt the craft from them, and he was also connected politically because he's a massive Republican. Not many people in popular culture have those views, really. So the Republican Party latched onto him and used him to help promote things. And he was the he was an appointment to the President's Council of Physical Fitness under Bush from 1990 to 1993, and loves Milton Friedman, and has maintained those views all throughout his life, essentially.
Yeah, because he was watching, was it Reagan speak? I think he was watching one of the presidential speeches. I'm pretty sure it was Reagan, who he did eventually meet as well. And Reagan was talking obviously about free enterprise, getting the government off your back, making your own.
Making something of yourself.
Yeah. And that just, at the time, that was just so far from where he'd come from in, the socialist country that he was living in, to jump into that. It just obviously just clicked with him. And ever since that point in time, he basically asked his mate, so who's that on TV? Reagan. What political parties you belong to? Republican. Okay, I'm a Republican.
It's got a much better sounding name, Republican as well. So he took an opportunity in 2003, the special recall election, to basically become governor of California, which is bigger than some countries. California and its turnover, and
it's huge.
It's huge, and there's some, without going into the rules, there's a way that you can have midterm elections and kick governors out in California, and he took advantage of that and stole power off some popular sort of stuff, like removing this levy on registrations that people were getting slugged with. That was a new rule, but also just generally Republican values and the like. He replaced Gray Davis and was re-elected to another full term in 2006, which finished in 2011. So he was governor for quite a long time, and he's a fiscally conservative, kind of socially liberal kind of guy.
He's been the source of a lot of contention throughout his life, and like it's just endless the amount of things that as he's had to deal with in that regard. And I think we'll probably touch on this briefly, but he has been so much seen as like sort of progressive in his sort of the social, climatic, and even some of his fiscal policy slightly adjusting, that he was talked to being then centre left for a period of time. Yet, what he's totally like embedded in being a Republican because of what it represents. But what he actually talks about in the book is that he just wants to make the world a better place. He just wants to give back, or he just wants to give back to America. He said he's had all these bounties provided for him, by the American system that exists. So he wants to be able to provide back to it, which is pretty amazing.
And basically after that, he returned to acting and got back involved in the bodybuilding scene as an ambassador sort of thing. And he's had some hard issues throughout his life where he's had to have valve replacements and stuff.
A lot of media controversy around that too.
And he also, obviously split with his wife after there was a big controversy around him having an affair with his housekeeper and fathering a child to her, and they've split and they're no longer together. And tell me some of the themes around what you thought, mate. I mean, there's endless other detail, but
Yeah.
I think that kind of encapsulates his life without giving away the whole book either.
I was going to say, I was talking about sort of the controversies that he's been through, or there's just, that just sort of follow him everywhere. And it's probably the way that he holds himself and the way that he approaches and lives things. Plus now being in public life, you're totally exposed to that anyway. And so, he's sort of got this lens of being this thick, muscular, no brains guy. And so this book becomes a real sort of inflection point, released in 2012 to break some of the controversies and present his point of view, which is really, really nice. He certainly sounds somewhat chauvinistic throughout the book. I don't know what your thoughts are. Definitely does. But at the same time, he probably presents a less chauvinistic point of view because that's the way he is to his core.
I think he's a caring kind of guy, in terms of socially and culture. Yeah, I think he's not your traditional chauvinist, I wouldn't have thought, but maybe some of his views, being from a older generation, are a bit different to the younger generation. Yeah,
but also he's also got allegations of misconduct and all this other stuff, which is not, that's in a completely different basket. So he is obviously a rich Hollywood star, therefore, he's never done hard work, or he's just fallen into acting, has now made millions of dollars, whereas he made some of his big bucks early on in property. So
I would say that was key to his success, because
leverage.
Yeah, really interesting about this book, and you've touched on a few of the points I completely agree with, is that he made it so he didn't need what he really wanted, if that makes sense. So because he'd built up, he was doing all this hard work, bricklaying and creating a nest egg for himself. He always had that to fall back on. And so he didn't have to jump into the next role if it wasn't a good one. He didn't need the money, right? So he was able to be much more selective about the movies that he did make and wait for the right one.
Yeah, he wasn't a career actor as such.
Yeah, and there's real power in that. Not needing what you actually want, I think, is an awesome theme for...
He was creating his own scarcity in that creative environment.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Which helped him build his brand out and everything beyond. So obviously the controversy came out about his father being, in the Nazi party, and then so he had to go through the process of digging into that, and then bringing out what the historical war papers at the time said, that he did have no involvement in sort of the mass, whatever you want to call it, mass executions and all the other atrocities that occurred, aside from the fact it was a voluntary joining. Obviously he's been battered around in the sort of the Republican Democratic spheres, in his political life. Is he over here? Is he over here? Where does he sit? And then all the exciting news that comes with that. And then obviously the affairs, which you've touched on. So this book was really an opportunity for him to sort of present his story, which I think he's done a really good job. And you definitely get his character. I get the same character out of watching Pumping Iron as I do reading the book.
Yeah.
Just a larger than life dude.
Yeah.
So tell us about Arnie and what you took away.
I just told you about Arnie. I just spent 40 minutes telling you about Arnie.
I was going to say, tell me about Arnie's and tell us about Arnie's takeaways.
Okay. All right. So themes for me, he's just one of the most determined and driven people I've ever read about. and that hard work couples great success every time. Whenever you read one of these books, it doesn't fall to their feet. They bloody work for it. There's a lot of talent and natural ability that he's got. But he is one of the most determined, energetic, never stop people. And I think there's a bit of a dark side to that too that I picked up. And it's that at all costs, you know. And I think it's had a positive and a negative effect on his life. Like, without being cynical, I don't think it's an accident that he married into the Kennedy family, right? I'm not saying that he orchestrated that because he wanted to get to the power or he didn't love Maria, but I'm sure that was part of the attraction, you know. And he's...
Yeah, there's a lack of sort of organic. It's always output focused.
Yes, that's what it is.
Output
and that might be a bit rough on him, but it is that sort of way. And like, nothing's ever enough, right?
Yeah.
And I actually found myself feeling pretty sorry for him or not wanting to. There's certainly traits I really admire about him, many, but a lot I don't either. And I kind of found myself feeling sad for him by the end of the book, to be honest. He's kind of like, particularly with the other thing I found that was a bit of a red flag to me was the only things that were really revelations was he named, say, for example, in his with the affairs, he named one that he had when he was first going out with Maria, and the one that was or was it when he was with he had an affair, whether it was when he was with Maria or with his previous girlfriend, and then hit the one that came out in the media about his son with the house, with his maid, essentially. They're the only things that he really talks about in the book, right? And I don't think there's much, and that to me is quite a coincidence with the fact that those are the two he'd been publicly outed on.
You're in a conspiracy now, Lockie.
Well, it's...
I'll back you in on that too.
Look, I don't know. I'm not saying... What I'm just saying is that's quite a coincidence to me. So what else?
Yeah.
Right?
And I think just the very nature of the lifestyle that he lived, it sort of leads you down a different path. But, you know, it's sort of the whole... The spots on the... You know, the spots on the cheetah, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. So unfortunately now he's kind of lost his family, right?
Yeah, which is a sad outcome.
Because he sounded like he was quite a family person throughout it as well.
So that's the disclaimer for being completely sort of output focused and so driven. But he was so driven. Like he would develop these visions for where he wanted to go. Like that was just so profound. And you talk about, you know, the vision of America, you know, the vision of making it to America, the vision of being on the stage, and, you know, so much so being on the stage, Mr. Universe, having won it already. So much so that, you know, he was renowned to say, you know, when he won, that he wasn't exhilarated when he did win. It was just the way it was supposed to happen.
That's confidence,
you know, and it was the way it was supposed to happen. Therefore, he didn't have as much excitement as what you would expect.
I really admire the way he has massive goals that seem ridiculous.
Yeah, because
if you don't shoot high, you're giving yourself no chance, right? And he is, you know, he kind of did it, which is like awesome. But even if he didn't, he would have got much further than if he'd just said, if he didn't dream big, you know?
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like when he, because he just had such a clear vision of where he was going, and then he'd almost set like these goals in place, and you jump into what was called like what he calls like autopilot mode, where he'd have to, if he had to change course, and he did have to change course a couple of times, he would have to like unwind his vision and then turn off autopilot. Otherwise, you'd just keep charging forward in that sort of direction, which is just so, you know.
And like coupled that big dreams with the ridiculous energy, meant he just kept going
driving
towards it, right?
Driving through the brick wall. I was going to say,
what else
really,
you got there?
I was going to say, really, you know, when he said about the exhilarating thing, completely different scale of achievement, but just that resonated so much with landing in Tassie off the back of the paddle we did.
Yeah.
I was just, you know, I was like, wow, you know.
Awesome.
You know, it just, what he said, he summarised it so well. Because there was no other choice. The only choice was to, you know, to make it across.
Well, yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Call in the chopper?
Yeah, so, and so because that was the only choice, when it was there, it was kind of like, awesome.
That's really interesting.
That's
wow,
it.
I didn't really think about it like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, which is very strange, because you get people asking like, you know, we pumped, we exhilarated, we excited. Yeah, you know, it was good, but it was absolutely always going to happen. So, you know, yeah, we had no alternative mission for that trip.
So you had a different view on it than people who are just hearing about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're in it.
Yeah, which certainly resonated quite a bit, which is quite interesting, because when I'd read that, say, before doing the trip, it sort of, I interpreted it in a slightly different way. I was like, wow, you know, he just doesn't care, or just doesn't have emotion. And then maybe I don't have emotion.
You are, Arnie. The other thing is, like, people massively underestimated him in terms of his intelligence, I think. Like, he's a really smart guy. And I think you see this a lot, that people kind of caricature public figures in certain boxes. A lot in politics too. Like, people like George Bush Jr., right, are seen as a complete moron. I'm sure he's not the smartest president to ever, but he's no idiot, right? And like, I very much disagree with a lot of his things he's done. I'm not a fan of his, but I also recognise that Donald Trump's not a complete moron. He has, you know, he's able to be a president. Like, yes, he's doing in my opinion, a pretty shit job, but he's not a complete fool. Clive Palmer is not an idiot, right?
But only people in Australia would know what that means. Yeah.
For our worldwide audience, these people, you can, they've got talent.
Yeah, there's something that's got them to where they are.
It's easier if you don't agree with someone to just put them in that box of this person's a moron. But that's the simplistic and, in my opinion, untrue way to kind of, and robs you of a chance to learn from some of these people too.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? Because obviously, Trump and him being on the same side of the political fence, but obviously slightly skewed in where they sit on that
different
scale.
Ends of that party.
Yeah, different ends of that party. But so obviously, Arnold needed to be backing Trump so much so that I'm pretty sure he took over The Apprentice, or he took over the TV show for it. But that's obviously, as with all of Trump's relationships, that sort of flipped on its head. And there was a recent, not so recent, but relatively recent quote where Arnold's saying, "Hey, Donald, I have a great idea. Why don't we switch jobs? You take over TV because you're such an expert in ratings, and I take over your job. And then people can finally sleep comfortably again."
That's awesome. Because there's no doubt in my mind he would have tried to be president if it was allowed. Arnold.
I think he has. I think he has tried. I think he's tried to get around because there's a lot of barriers in place around.
Well, you have to be born in America, don't you?
Yeah, it's natural citizenship or something.
Right.
They refer to, and he obviously doesn't tick that box, but he's definitely tried to sort of
Yeah, well, there you go.
break his way through that brick wall as well.
And there's just something else about this guy's got an aura around him, you know. When you meet
energy.
When you meet him, I don't know this, but
I've had a friend
from all
that's met him.
accounts. Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah, and which this talks to his sort of social progressiveness. You know, he was one of the keynote speakers and presenters at the recent climate change conference.
Oh, yeah.
And my friend was over there. She got to meet him, and just this energy, this aura, even at his age now. What is he, like 70 years old? It's unbelievable.
He looks good for 70. And the other thing is, I think just his physical massiveness creates something, and then his energy, and there's something about him that people just flock to and is intoxicating. And he's definitely leveraged that throughout his life. That was kind of my takeaways, but it's a great book.
I was going to say the just dialing back to the work thing, because it can't be underplayed how hard he worked. So much so that people would complain to him about having to work for 10 days straight, or doing 12-hour days, and he would respond with, "What the fuck are you talking about? When the day is 24 hours, what else do you do?" Because he would be getting up, he'd be doing 2 to 3 workout sessions, multi-hour workout sessions a day. He'd be doing acting school or doing his bachelor. He'd be running his business. He'd be going to networking. He'd be going partying as well, flying around the other side of the world, all in the span of 24 hours. And it's kind of like, what are you doing with that 24 hours? I mean, he sets the bar quite high.
Yeah. But on that, I think it depends what you as personally derive enjoyment from as well. What's the right balance for you is different for everyone.
Well,
for
that's
him,
the thing. He saw work as not work.
No. Yeah. So, and that's had multiple positive and negative effects on his life.
Yeah. Well, work for him was not work. It was literally adventure. He was going on adventure. He was doing exciting things. So, and that's been proven time and time again of how much energy that drives into that internal core. So just to make it happen.
It is a great book that definitely should be read if you get a chance, or listen to it. Like it listens like a and it listens like a story, essentially, a really exciting one. And I was surprised because when my brother said you should read this, I'm like, Arnie, why would I read this?
I had the exact same reaction when you told me to read it.
Yeah, I'm like, you got to read this book. And you're like, why would I read this? Arnie, Terminator, whatever. But there's so much more to it. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a great narrative. So what are you going to do, Lockie? What are you taking away?
Work every minute of this day.
What are you doing with your 24 hours?
I know. I think just have big dreams is probably the big thing, and take them seriously, and know that maybe you won't ever get them, but if you try, you'll get closer than you would have otherwise, probably.
You put in the reps.
Because I don't have, that's what he says. And
that's what he says all the way through the book.
And I'm trying to find the right word for it, but momentum or moving forward or action or kinetic energy in your life is really important, just to be lean towards action. He always is doing something or moving forward or trying something new or thinking about something, and that movement creates outcomes, I reckon. They're kind of the two things I'd take from it.
He says keep moving forward and don't reflect too much. That's his that's it's very much him. That's very much him. It's sort of like just lay waste and all the burning debris on the side. Don't worry about it. Just keep moving forward. Which I think there's probably again a slight balance you can take there as well. But,
what about you, mate?
Big ones for me, like totally everything you've said, mate. But the importance of reps again. There was a speech that he had to do at the UN. This is later on. This is well and truly, into his
and
political career.
by reps, you mean practice, don't you?
Reps,
or repetition.
Repetition.
That's
Sorry.
what that stands for.
Let's expand that out. Repetition.
For those non-bodybuilders, unlike us.
There's two of them here. Right, we got an insight now that we've read the book and have seen the doco. Reps and
we're pros.
Sets and doing all the
weights.
So he talks about the muscle memory, and how important the reps are to build that muscle memory. And he practiced that UN speech 55 times, which is quite interesting because I look at the likes of Churchill. Churchill was meant to be one of the greatest orators that has ever lived, and he was renowned to practice of the same magnitude.
Really?
Yes, really.
That's cool.
But this is the thing. He would then practice so much and then come out without any sort of written dialogue or anything, not because he was doing it off the cuff, but he knew the ins and outs of that speech so well.
Well, it's hard work. It's the practice that goes in behind it. Yeah,
we're gonna definitely jump into Churchill one day.
Yeah, and another good one with that is there's a book on Jordan I read that was really good, and
Michael Jordan.
Jordan, yeah, and he was the hardest trainer, right? It doesn't just happen, That's the biggest takeaway from reading some of these biographies. And like what you just said, it's a really interesting insight about Churchill.
At the end of the book, he jumps into, this is the other thing, is he jumps into his 10 rules.
I have to revisit those because I don't remember them. That's cool.
Well, I'll do a quick skim through just because it's probably, I'm not going to explain them because you can certainly
That's another podcast.
That's the podcast in itself. But
I'll read the book.
And I certainly expanded them beyond 10, but there was turn your liabilities into assets. The impossible is only so until it is made possible. Never follow the crowd.
That's a good one.
That's a good investing rule. Never let pride get in your way. Selling is an essential part of life. Don't overthink. Forget plan B. Use humour to settle a score. A day has 24 hours. Reps, which we've explained. Don't blame your parents. And big change takes balls. So that was 12 of the 10 rules.
That's awesome.
I added a couple of extras on the back end there. But all of those have lot of...
That's a great summary.
And it summarises everything he talks about in the book too in a really well-done way.
Awesome.
And so he says, live a risky life and a spicy life. Yeah. Every day you should do something that scares you. Stay hungry.
Oh, that's a good way to finish.
It's a good
So hopefully we've shone a light on a book that people might not have realised is actually a pretty cool read.
Highly, highly recommend. Regardless of your views of the man himself, regardless of how much you know about the man himself or have read other things about him, I think it's totally an invigorating read.
100%. See you next week.
Thanks, mate.